What we're doing today does not happen everywhere. We're taking institutions with long and distinguished histories, institutions we need, institutions we rely upon, and we're applying scrutiny, review, and inspection. We're testing, we're probing, we're challenging, we're even criticizing. And we're doing this because we need these institutions to be above reproach. We need them to be respected and trusted. We need them to be above bias, taint, and prejudice. We need these institutions to be fair, just, even-handed, proportional, and wholly immune from the vagaries of politics. That's what we expect and demand and need from the Department of Justice and the FBI, and those expectations should be consistently exacting, because the power we give prosecutors and law enforcement is an awesome power. The power to prosecute, the power to charge, the power to indict is the power to impact reputations, it's the power to deprive people of their liberty, it is the power in some instances to even try to take the very life of a citizen. And we give police and prosecutors tremendous powers, and with those powers comes a corresponding expectation of fairness and just dealing. This Inspector General's report should conjure anger, disappointment, and sadness in everyone who reads it. This IG report lays bare the bias, the animus, the prejudging of facts by senior FBI agents and senior attorneys. And attempts to minimize and mitigate this bias are so antithetical to what we want and deserve in our law enforcement officers, and it's dangerous to the broader community. I've seen media efforts, and I've seen efforts from some, not all, but some of my Democrat colleagues to shift the burden of bias onto those impacted by that bias. That it is somehow the responsibility of those affected by bias to show how that bias negatively impacted them. What a dangerous shifting of the burden. It is not the public's job to prove the bias shown by the FBI did not influence decision-making. It is the FBI's job to prove to the public that this manifest bias was not outcome determinative. And bias and fairness cannot coexist. And that is why no lawyer seated up here today would ever allow a biased juror to sit on his or her jury. And no citizen would ever allow a biased police officer or judge to work on any matter of any significance. There is a presumption that bias is bad, and that is a presumption we should accept in nearly every single facet of life. As we read this report, we're reminded of Jim Comey's decision to hold the July 5th press conference and appropriate the charging decision away from the prosecutors. We see Jim Comey drafting an exoneration memo before important witnesses, like the target, were even interviewed. Ironically, this Inspector General has been accused of softening or watering down his report, when the reality is it was Jim Comey who softened and watered down his press release announcing no charges against Secretary Clinton. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding which DOJ policies to follow and which to ignore. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether there is sufficient evidence to support each and every element of an offense. We see Jim Comey and Jim Comey alone deciding whether to send a letter to Congress in the throes of a looming election. Now, his justification for this is that he did not have confidence in the objectivity of Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Whether it was her asking him to refer to this case as a matter rather than an investigation, or her meeting with Bill Clinton while Hillary Clinton was under investigation, or the matter he has alluded to but claims he cannot discuss publicly, clearly Jim Comey had lost confidence in the DOJ to handle the case in a way worthy of public trust. But that leads us to the one thing we did not see Jim Comey do, which was take any steps to spur the appointment of special counsel in the Hillary Clinton investigation. When he lost confidence in the Trump Justice Department, he memorialized private conversations, he leaked them, and he admitted he did so to spur the appointment of special counsel because he didn't trust the career prosecutors at the Department of Justice. When he lost confidence in the Obama Justice Department, he didn't make special memos. He didn't share them with his law professor friends. He didn't leak the information. He didn't lift a finger to get special prosecutor. Instead, he appointed himself FBI director, attorney general, special counsel, lead investigator, and the general arbiter of what is good and right in the world according to him. Now, one of the last times I spoke with Director Comey was in a committee hearing. We had a pointed exchange on what I thought was the FBI making decisions based in part on politics. And he, in his typically sanctimonious way, told me that he disagreed. He said the men and women of the FBI do not, quote, give a hoot about politics. Unfortunately, and I use that word intentionally, unfortunately, he was dead wrong. There were agents and attorneys at the FBI who gave a lot more than a hoot about politics. There's Andy McCabe, the former deputy director and acting director of the FBI, an agency which investigates and charges others for making false statements, himself accused of making false statements and showing a lack of candor. I think I recall, perhaps someone can correct me, but I think I recall some of my Democrat colleagues falling over themselves to offer a job to Andy McCabe when he was let go for making false statements and for a lack of candor. But those same colleagues apparently weren't hiring. They didn't have any openings when others in a related investigation called Russia were charged with the same offense. There were FBI agents and attorneys who decided to prejudge the outcome of the Hillary Clinton case before the investigation ended. I want you to let that sink in for a second. They prejudged the outcome of the Hillary Clinton investigation before the investigation ended, and these exact same FBI agents and attorneys prejudged the outcome of the Russia investigation before it even began. If prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it ends and prejudging the outcome of an investigation before it begins is not evidence of outcome determinative bias, for the life of me, I don't know what would be. That is textbook bias. It is quite literally the definition of bias, allowing something other than the facts to determine your decision. These agents were calling her president before she was even interviewed. They were calling for the end of the Trump campaign before the investigation even began. They were calling for impeachment simply because he happened to be elected. That is bias. And with all due respect, it's the FBI's job, not mine, to prove that bias can ever be harmless. Because I don't agree. I think bias is always harmful. So we'll spend today on a small in number but significant in leadership group of DOJ and FBI officials who had leadership and supervisory roles in the Clinton and Russia investigations and who failed to meet the basic expectations of fundamental fairness. But there are tens of thousands of FBI agents and DOJ employees who do meet our exacting expectations, and we will not be calling their names today, unfortunately, because we don't do IG investigations on agents and prosecutors who do their jobs with character and professionalism. To those agents and prosecutors who do the right thing, the right way, and for the right reasons, we'll get through this. It will be tough and it will be difficult, but we will emerge on the other side with a stronger FBI and a stronger Department of Justice because we have to. We cannot have a justice system that bases decisions on anything other than facts. To our fellow citizens watching at home, be unrelenting in your expectations of our justice system. Never lower those expectations. Respect for the rule of law is the thread that holds the tapestry of this country together. And it depends upon you having confidence in those you empower to enforce the law. And importantly, do not ever accept the notion that those victimized or impacted or negatively treated because of bias or prejudgment have any burden of proving harm. Bias is intrinsically harmful. It is the making up of your mind based on anything other than the facts. We use a blindfolded woman holding a set of scales to symbolize what we want in a justice system. And there is nothing more antithetical to justice than lowering that blindfold and making up your mind based on who is standing in front of you. That is not who we are. That is not what we should ever become. There is a saying in the courtroom, may justice be done though the heavens fall. You won't hear that saying in politics. You're more likely to hear, let's win at all costs, the heavens be damned. We can survive with politicians we don't trust. We can't survive with a justice system we don't trust. With that, I would recognize the gentleman from Maryland.